So for those of you who don't know what the Ethical Fashion Forum is, we are an industry body for those who are interested in ethics and sustainability across the fashion sector. We run something called the Source Platform. We've done this since the beginning of 2011. It's essentially an online global platform for sustainable fashion. We support businesses all the way from budding entrepreneurs up to big guys like H&M to integrate sustainability and ethics into the heart of what they do. We do this through providing business intelligence, tools, resources, a database, a network. We do loads of events. We have around over 8,000 network members now, 500 companies that we work with, or designers that we work with a bit closer across the fashion sector, more than 500 now these days, in 127 countries. So in terms of the fashion sector, we do have a very broad scope, and we get to speak every day to lots of really interesting folks on all areas of the value chain and beyond. So today I'm going to share with you a little bit of what we do at Source Intelligence. It has a lot to do with trends and analyzing business practices and looking at kind of bigger picture stuff that's happening across the industry. So that's what I'm going to share with you today. And the future is ethical. So obviously Rana Plaza has been a thread that has kind of been running through this day, stitching together the urgent need for better ethical business practice across the whole value chain. And I'm sure many of you tuned in Monday night to the Panorama investigation into the problems that persist across the Bangladesh ready-made garment sector. And I'm sure many of you have read the excellent piece in the New York Times, I think it was 2 weeks ago now, by Stephanie Clifford and Stephen Greenhouse, revealing some of the fundamental problems with auditing, and obviously that's been a theme through today. So I think my point is here, it's just becoming ever more clear on the bigger picture scale that factory inspections aren't working as the way they should. Maybe retailer codes of conduct are too difficult to enforce at this time, and thus some of their meaning has been stripped away. But with the global media still hot on the topic, the time is clearly ripe for looking beyond basic compliance. Many of you are already doing that, and towards building sustainable supply chains that are safer, healthier, happier, now and for the future. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about what that future looks like. So part of what we do at Source is to support businesses in building sustainable supply chains. And in this presentation, I'm going to explore kind of 4 ways that we see the future of fashion starting to be, and hopefully will inevitably become more ethical. After all, social and environmental sustainability is the biggest business opportunity now for the future. I think we've seen that through the presentations that we've heard today. It's definitely true. And these are the 4 areas I'm going to touch on briefly. How businesses are integrating environmental and social values at the heart of business practice, just some practical ways that those in the industry are doing this already. This kind of trend of transparency, which we've clearly heard throughout the entire day. I'm just going to talk about some of the ways that fashion companies are approaching transparency. Talk a little bit on that same vein about getting coordinated, and then kind of revolutionizing fashion value chains as a whole. In the past 2 years, we've seen companies, begin to integrate social environmental strategies into the heart of their operations. It's obvious it's no longer an add-on or a marketing scheme. It's the future of business, plain and simple. If a company is going to stand the test of time, like Dion said, it has got to clean up its act from the bottom right up to the top. There are many best practice examples of fashion companies beginning to integrate these values into what they do, and here I'm going to highlight a few. Now these may look like some of the usual suspects for those of us who work in fashion, or maybe it's just because I write a lot and talk a lot about these companies all the time, so that maybe I'm just used to banging on about them. But I think what's important to note is that the scope of their commitment and investment in social and environmental innovation is commendable. And they're doing a lot more than some of the other companies out there are doing, and they're actually willing to talk about it, which is a really important part. I know a lot of companies are doing stuff behind the scenes, but maybe they don't talk about it, and that's kind of part of the transparency issue that we now have. So just a couple of examples. Obviously, we have here H&M. They're now the largest buyer of organic cotton globally. They're heavily involved in water reduction projects. They've just developed 2 fire and safety training films in the wake of the Rana Plaza collapse. And they are delivering this to 1,250 factories already, which is great. H&M, although their supply chain is far from perfect, they definitely seem to be going beyond basic compliance, ensuring that products are created in a safe and healthy way, at least for the future. And well, they're working on it anyway. In terms of environment, they're one of the first companies to launch a worldwide clothing take-back scheme in efforts to address textile waste along with M&S. Again, a long way to go on this, but they're investing heavily in new technologies for reuse, recycle, and also closed-loop repolymerization of garments and fibers. I won't bore you too much with that, but just to give you a picture of some of the ways that they're approaching these issues. Patagonia is another one who's been a leader in this space for quite a while, and they've been instrumental in pushing outdoor and sportswear companies to address their impacts. They've had the Don't Buy This Jacket campaign for a while now, sparking an industry-wide debate about overconsumption and whether the industry can still be profitable if we all consume a bit less. And then, of course, kind of Plan A down at the bottom. M&S's Plan A is probably one of the industry's most robust set of social and environmental commitments, 180 of them in total, of which now they've achieved 139, 31 on plan, 5 behind plan, mostly food, GM, and logistics related, so not so much fashion, but and some of them have been stretched even further because they've been met and they want to achieve more. So really promising stuff here. And the fact that these commitments have actually helped M&S save money. So again, that business case is evident. Plan A has generated 135 million pounds in net benefit for M&S since its inception in 2007. So it's just smart business, plain and simple. Another great example is Kering Group has developed their environmental profit and loss account. I think what's really worth mentioning about this is that it's the first time a big fashion company is putting real monetary value, like an actual cost, publicly to its impact of its operations across the supply chain and what that's doing in terms of the environment. So I think this is something really promising, and hopefully will set a precedence for the industry. So as sustainability becomes seen as more important, as more of a business imperative for many of you, there are now more innovative technology-driven tools. I'm going to talk about a few of those that I think we've seen that are really exciting. In addition, of course, to the Responsible Trade Worldwide software that we saw outside, which is super interesting. But here's just a couple others. Greenstone Carbon Management has come up, recently launched something called Supplier Portal, which is quite interesting. It's an online responsible sourcing tool for suppliers and their buyers to track and monitor environmental and labor, health, safety, bribery, corruption, all these different topics. And I think what's really interesting about the Supplier Portal is that it offers a calculator for a supplier to calculate their carbon, waste, and water footprint, which is, I'm sure as many of you know, something that's usually quite costly and generally done through quite expensive consultants. So that's quite exciting. Nike, of course, many of you know, have just launched this smartphone app that makes it easy for fashion designers and production teams to choose the most sustainable materials of what's out there anyway. It's called the Making app. It provides a mark out of 50 for 22 materials, so obviously there's still scope to expand that. And yeah, it's been developed over the last 7 years based on a whole huge comprehensive criteria. So again, enabling web technology to kind of make sustainable sourcing easier is a really exciting kind of area. It's important for people. But Made By has been doing some really exciting work around benchmarking. So they've created these scorecards that covers social standards, environmental issues related to fibers, and also national social policies. And I think part of the problem as businesses is that there's so many different certification systems and standards on the market. It's confusing. It's difficult to know which ones are better than others, which ones are more robust, which ones are more flexible, which ones are verifiable, transparent, easily implemented. So I think these made by benchmarks are something that you guys can take on board if you want to figure out which one works best for your business when you're making those key sourcing decisions. And then last but not least, the Higg Index, which I'm sure some of you have been involved in developing, is another exciting development in this space. Although it's far from perfect, it's definitely helping brands and retailers to measure their social and environmental performance of their products specifically. And I'll kind of show you in a second what that looks like. One of the organizations we work with is a consultancy called Best Foot Forward. They've done a bit of testing on the Higg Index to see how it works in practice. I'll show you that in a minute, but essentially it measures wastewater, land use, energy, toxicity, things like that. So not so much social aspects at the moment, but I think they're going to develop that in the next 2.0 version of There are some tools and programs that we've seen over the last couple of years that have developed that will help fashion get to grips with who makes their clothes and how they're made. These are a couple of my favorite examples of how companies are kind of approaching transparency. This first one here on the left, I don't know, it's not very big, but if you can see the little infographic, this is a company from New York called Everlane. They're a kind of mid-priced, kind of J. Crew style fashion brand, and they've taken this approach called radical transparency, which I really enjoy. And they've got this motto that goes, know your costs, know your factories, always ask why. And I really like that motto. Their goal is to tell people everything. So that consumers better understand how the products they consume are made, which is a really nice narrative, and it's one that our professors here from Coventry kind of talked about, that the fact that there's no relationship or very little relationship anymore between production and consumption, between our makers and our buyers. And so I think that's a really interesting approach to new business. And I mean, the proof is kind of in the pudding for Everlane. They've been trading since 2010. They've got $1.1 million in seed funding, over 500,000 registered users on their website, 31,000 Facebook likes, 11,000 Twitter followers, 40,000 Instagram followers, and they're only a tiny business. So, and there's already a bunch of different companies who are now, startup companies are popping up and kind of emulating their model. So I think that's really exciting model. Another similar approach is, you probably heard of, because they're European-based, but Honest Buy, founded by famous Belgian fashion designer Bruno Peters. They claim to be the world's first 100% transparency company, literally giving you every single detail about their product, from what it was, where the thread came from, all the way through to what their margins are, what Honest Buy's actual retail margins are, which is pretty unheard of. And a bit scary, but it's working for them as well. It seems they don't share sales figures specifically, but they did say in an interview that they were growing. Their turnover is definitely growing, and they were growing their client base quite steadily and quickly, which is exciting. I guess the difference with Honest Buy and Everlane is Honest Buy goes a little bit further, and they make sure that all their products are created using organic, fair trade, recycled, vegan, locally sourced materials. A favorite quote from Bruno Peters, which I think sums this whole thing up really well, this whole future trend thing, is that fashion, which by definition leads the crowd, is a good means to change things. I really like that. And then the last kind of tool that you see here, which I think is is also really exciting, there's probably a lot of scope for businesses to start doing similar things, is this brand's also from New York. They're called Indigenous. Again, they're kind of a mid-priced brand, but they've been going for like 20 years. They have hundreds, they're stocked in hundreds of boutiques throughout the world, mainly in the US, but increasingly more international as well. And they have something called the Fair Trace tool, which is a mobile-enabled web technology that lets shoppers see where garments originate from, how the fibers themselves were raised. Through the app, you can meet the artisan who handmade the particular product that this customer may have purchased, and to learn a little bit more about Indigenous' whole positive social impact structure. Matt Reynolds, who's the founder, explained to me actually just last week a little bit more about the Fair Trace tool, and how it seems like it's a consumer-facing thing, but actually he uses it also for supply chain management. And here's what he had to say about this tool. The back end of the Trace tool allows us to communicate directly with our artisan producers at the base of the pyramid via mobile phone-based voice and text technology. Our interactive artisan survey system, which is obviously filtered into this tool, is anonymous and confidential so that our artisans feel safe and not watched over, and uses the Grameen Progress Out of Poverty Index and our own questions to gather information. Having this type of data and information available in real time and voiced by the artisans themselves is invaluable. Indigenous is a brand that is working for the day when every artisan can give their family an opportunity to thrive, and this type of data helps us capture this information, in addition to helping us convince the entire apparel industry that fair trade must become standard practice. So, again, really exciting scope for this type of technology, much like the Responsible Trade Worldwide software, to revolutionize the way that we approach our supply chains and how we gather information about who those different actors are and what their needs are. Some of you maybe have seen this. This is another kind of exciting development created by MIT very recently. It's a cool interactive online map called Source Map, obviously, which is essentially a crowdsourced open directory of supply chains and carbon footprints. So you can create an interactive map of your supply chain so that anyone is available publicly, so that anyone can see where your products come from. So it may not say the factories, but it will show you what your supply chain map looks like. You can also use it to create barcodes for your products that are linked up to the source map. So the idea is that it aims to work in real time. And you can also set it up so that it notifies you instantly of any threats that might impact your supply chain. So if there's a tsunami in wherever, it will notify you instantly that that thing is happening, and that might affect your suppliers in that place. So again, useful for risk management. It's still fairly basic, so I'm sure they're probably working on it, but it's an exciting development nonetheless. In the scope of transparency, I think something that's really promising that we've seen is that more and more apparel companies are beginning to publicly publish their full tier 1 factory list. H&M is one example you'll see here, who makes this publicly available on their website as of March. There's loads of other companies doing it, Nike, Patagonia, and Nudie Jeans, which I'll show you an example. That's Nike and Levi Strauss. Nudie, so Nike, Patagonia, and Nudie Jeans all have interactive maps, so they are really kind of flashy and catchy and interactive, getting the consumers involved. Whereas others take the approach of just it's kind of a simple list. But I mean, nonetheless, it's still a serious step towards at least being open and honest about who your suppliers are, so that anybody can get involved in that process. If you can't at least say who made your clothes and where, open and honestly, if you have a serious supply chain problem. So, just to kind of sum up a little bit about what we're doing at Ethical Fashion Forum in terms of revolutionizing fashion supply chains. We have put together, or we're in the process of putting together a value chain call to action. So because Ethical Fashion Forum is an industry body, a collaborative industry body, we've got all these different partner organizations and member brands and designers who are all doing different bits and bobs, and so our role really is to bring together those different actors in one kind of space. And in response to the Rana Plaza tragedy, obviously a lot of our members were really affected and concerned about what happened, and so we've opted to put together a coordinated, collaborative response, kind of value chain call to action in response to the Rana Plaza that we collected from all of our different members, strategic phone calls with people like CEDEX and ETI, to put this together so everything is in one kind of voice. It's not a campaign, but it's something that we are going to use when we reach out to different companies. Maybe we'll speak with you about the way that we're engaging the industry. It's meant to be practical and constructive, and I just want to tell you a little bit about that, about the value chain call to action. We sent out a survey gathering what our members think is the problem with the fashion sector in terms of unruly supply chains, and what our kind of members think needs to happen to ensure that something like Rana Plaza doesn't happen again. And we received over 300 responses. It was really promising, some from suppliers and or even farmer groups in factory or in India and Bangladesh, all the way up to like a individual luxury fashion designer or production facility in the US. So we got some really interesting, very varied responses, but there were some serious themes that came out from these responses, and we've divided them into two different sections. Part one is short-term action. So you can see here a set of Bangladesh-specific short-term actions that need to happen. Companies sign the accord, implement tripartite national action plan, immediate improvements in factories, health and safety, support compensation to victims, implementing the amendment allowing unionization, raise minimum wage, penalize those responsible. So these are all the things that we feel like the industry has an opportunity to influence, to put pressure on government to make these things happen, or suppliers. And then the second part is more long-term. So there's definitely some themes that came out about what the state of our industry is and how we can move forward. And these really seem to be the areas that the industry is most concerned with, or feel are the biggest opportunities for change in the feasible future, but in a long-term kind of way. And these were the main areas: improved transparency and traceability, obviously something huge theme today. More and better industry collaboration, better auditing processes, better purchasing practices, support for what Joe was talking about earlier, the protect, respect, remedy framework, and just generally better decision-making processes across value chains, as Dion was talking about earlier. So again, these themes all kind of come up. This value chain call to action is going to help inform a new initiative that's being launched by ourselves, Ethical Fashion Forum, as well as key leaders in sustainability and fashion. Thank you.